64 was that magic number. Downbeat is the guy who got it. Or girl. We'll see. Alright, so English, but we're not quite sure. We're not quite sure what this will turn into. If I play this, we're going to enter Nimzo Indian land. I'm open to it. D5, Queen's Gambit. Declined. Bishop B4, Nimzo Indian. Okay, so Queen's Gambit declined. So let me go with this and try for what exactly? I'm going to try to... Well, I have a couple plans I could go forward with. One is the minority attack. And let me make sure that I don't give black an easy time with developing their light square bishop, so that's why it's Queen C2 first. And then I'll play E3, bishop here. If I'm going to go forward with a central expansion, that's the other plan, minority attack, which is to get this pawn up to B5. The other thing is central expansion, which means the bishop belongs on D3, and this knight not to its classical square F3. Let's drop back. I'm not so quick to give up my bishop. I don't know if there's a great difference between these two squares. Maybe there is, actually. If I go to F4 and knight here, and then there would be a knight for bishop exchange, potentially. Probably. But, okay, if the knight moves, we're going to have the dark square bishops come off, which I is. Here's some wonderful grammar for you. Which is quite alright for me, because my resulting pawn structure is on dark, and it complements my remaining light square bishop very well. So one move away from being fully developed. Do I have some other options? First, quick second, I thought about this. G5, I could take that, but I don't really care about going after that bishop just yet. Let me make sure I get developed. Castle. This bishop is a little bit short on squares. Doing something outlandish like F4, F5, trying to trap this, I don't know about that. That weakens this considerably. In fact, after F4, this knight could drop back. Okay, let's not do that. So should I still continue with this idea of the central expansion? I have enough support on D4, which is important, because after this pawn makes a capture, this queen could be putting pressure on it. So can I go right for F3 in this? I'm going to give it a shot. And with my bishop now on H4, if it's challenged, if, let's say, the knight moves to H5, I could drop all the way back to F2, which is quite helpful with supporting D4. So how should black be responding? What would you do if you were playing as Team Black? Have all the minor pieces out, castled. Should the queen come out somewhere? Is coming out in this direction a good idea? Alright, knight H5 it is. No thank you. I'm gonna avoid that. Placing a bishop or a knight. Oh, okay, well, this looks to prevent a pawn duo, D4 E4 structure. That's a quite interesting move, but I might still say let's go. There's some loose pieces here. You know what I could try to do? I think I could try to be sneaky. Now, what am I talking about? I could take that pawn. I could take that pawn. I trusted my opponent right there. Did you see that? Did you hear it? I trusted my opponent. That's a free pawn. Attack twice, defended once. This is what I was going to do. I was going to be sneaky, play queen. I was trying to be fancy. Queen b3, hitting this and pinning this pawn with e4 to follow. But that is a free pawn. Look right in front of you. Look right in front of you. Okay, so that really wasn't defending against e4, but I trusted my opponent there. You heard it. And now I'm hitting the knight. And I have some checking opportunities. My queen is she can't be dislodged so easily, so I'm gonna follow through. So it's the same thing. I'm able to get in this e4 advance, but now under much more favorable circumstances, of course, with the material edge. And if there isn't this capture, well, regardless, being able to maintain or just get this structure in means that I will be able to get in e5 and push my opponent around in the most, or the best defensive square for this kingside position. The knight on f6 in particular will have to find a new home. This knight is ready to jump in and do some damage on these light squares, and that's an interesting idea. So getting ready to jump in here, maybe I do well to do what? Maybe play knight here. Yeah, let's try that. Jump my knight in. I think my opponent will offer a queen trade, and I'm okay with it, but maybe I'm really wanting to get something more out of it, since I feel that it's my opponent's king who's more vulnerable. Having this structure with light squares in a piece already could be jumping in there. I find that as a good thing. Knight here, I could pick up the bishop. I don't know how great that is. I have my center covered enough. As soon as I do this, the knights make use of d5. Do I really want to allow that? Oh, let me pin this. Yeah, let me get... Oh, yeah. And then give this pawn up. Let me get a rook working, finally. My queen is still in black's territory. Black can't be comfortable like that. And I could play bishop here. I don't need the support on this square. I also want to just get rid of this knight. I think getting rid of this knight means that my opponent's position will crumble very quickly. I could have also considered bishop g3 for some discovered tricks on the queen, but I think the primary glue here for black is this knight on f7. Once I overtake the f6 square, my queen and rook are directly or indirectly having prospects on the f7 and f8 squares. I have all my pieces working. My center is covered. He's out of play for as long as I keep my pawn on e4 sitting. It was very tempting, I must say, to just want to do this particular move. And now there's going to be some serious problems because there's an ensuing discovered check. So if knight here, I take the queen, and now I take the knight with check. So this is netting a full piece. Actually, more than that. I'm not going to take the knight. There's a fork to follow. So this is a serious material disadvantage, and I'm not going to, just as I would not capture a pinned piece, I am not going to capture either one of those rooks. Okay, my opponent resigned. Good game. This is just this last position. It's a good idea to just keep this as is and not take a rook until one of them moves. Black, as a result, will just be wasting a move. Alright, good game. Let's flip this and see if we could take something away from it. My initial thought is, well, keep in mind that if you're wanting to eliminate white's potential plan of a central expansion, well, let me back up for a second. If your main intention is to really go forward with the Queen's Gambit declined and not the Nimzo Indian, which you do have the opportunity to play right now, I think you can enter the Queen's Gambit declined under more favorable circumstances, which is to say, at this point right here, don't play your knight out, but just play d5 right away. But then again, maybe it allows me some different opportunities. Maybe I don't have to plant my pawn on d4. The point I'm getting at is that with the knight on f6, with the king knight developed prior to the bishop, I do have bishop g5, and I'm able to have this central expansion available. You'll note right here, if it followed d5, d4, bishop e7, then I don't have the bishop coming out to g5. I'd have to do something like knight f3, which means then I can't go forward with the central expansion. Or if I'm playing e3, well then you don't have to worry about my bishop coming out. There's a main difference between knight f6 and bishop e7, and it involves eliminating one of white's middle game plans. This is the first one that struck me as a little bit odd. Here's another thing that you could go for as black. You can go forward with not castling here. And the reason behind that is to make use of this f8 square with your queen knight. You could go knight d7 to f8. It's a very long process, but this maneuver that I'm about to express is played in order to trade off light square bishops. My bishop will be on d3, and so you could go forward with knight d7, f8, e6 with a tempo on the bishop. And so we're seeing as a result a reason to not play h6. d7, f8, e6 with tempo on the bishop backs up. g6, again this is very long-winded, knight g7 followed by bishop to f5. I'm not able to use some analysis feature on here, but if you could follow that, the knight's journey to not castle, make use of f8, knight d7, f8, e6, g6, the knight that's now on e6 comes to g7, and finally, bishop here. Now, of course, white could be doing many things in the meantime, but I believe that black will be successful in at least exchanging off those light square bishops, which is exactly what you would want since you have pawns fixed on light squares. Anyhow, that's an approach you could have been taking. It was not the road you went down. And this actually turns out to play into my hands. If you really did want to force this dark square bishop exchange, you should do so prior to my playing f3, because this is a convenient reply that I have. After I have f3 inserted, I avoid the exchanges. While I don't have a space advantage in this position just yet, I'm viewing it as if I do, because I can get this e4 move in successfully, and I'm then just one step away from entering your territory and claiming that space advantage. And so that's a reason for me to avoid this particular exchange, since I'm anticipating I will have a space advantage, and this is the beginning of the end, really. There's no turning back at this point. After the material edge, I don't believe I gave you an opportunity to sneak away. And it's difficult to really suggest something for you. The best one way that you could be meeting a central expansion like this is to strike at my d4 pawn with c5. So that's the other move to be looking into. If you're not going to do this move, then d4 is going to be very well secure, and I won't have any problems with getting this advance in, maybe right away, or by first getting another piece involved. But I like being able to do this move right away. f5, as we saw, was a blunder, and the reasons that I was expressing, I was hesitant to make this particular move. It looks appealing, maybe it's good further back, that is to say, but I didn't want to give up that d5 square. But this turned out to be a blunder, the queen f7 move. And lastly, don't take one of those rooks until one of these rooks moves, until your hand is forced. Okay. Good game.